Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones! How are you today? So, like I mentioned in the last video, I am finally back in America, and you know what that means? It means I don't just have to cover PlayStation games anymore. I can cover games from whatever systems I want! I've missed you, GameCube with built-in Game Boy player! Mwah! Oh, Nintendo Switch! I've missed you most of all. Mwah! You and I have a lot of catching up to do. Seriously, look at all of these Switch games I bought while I was in China. I definitely have a lot of catching up to do. But first things first, it is the 4th anniversary of my first video. So let's see. I covered Glover, wrestling game, Glover, wrestling game. So I guess now it's time to talk about Glover. For the PlayStation. Why do I do these things to myself? For those of you that don't know about Glover or don't want to watch my 4-year-old video on it, it's a whale, crab, fish. Yeah. Yeesh, can't blame me there. Allow me to quickly summarize it for you. There's an enchanted kingdom with a wizard who wears magical gloves. One day there's a horrible accident. The wizard gets turned to stone, one of the gloves becomes the evil villain known as Cross-Stitch, the 7 magic crystals go flying, so to stop them from shattering, Glover turns them into rubber balls, and has to go through Atlantis World, Circus World, Pirate World,
Glove World,
Prehistoric World, Fortress of Fear World, and Out of This World to get them back, all while protecting the ball and fighting off his brother's evil creations. It's an incredibly simple story that definitely shouldn't take 17 minutes and 35 seconds to explain. John. Look, what do you want from me? It's my first episode. So then why am I covering the PlayStation version of Glover when I've already done a video on the N64 version? Surely they're the same game, right? Well, apparently not. Glover for the N64 is often seen as a cult classic, a sort of underdog among the other 3D platformers of the time, and is still beloved by many people, myself included. The game generally got average to positive scores, like 70% from Game Rankings to an 8.3 from IGN, reminding us all that Glover for the N64 is a better game than Pokemon Omega Ruby. Whereas the PlayStation version, well, suddenly on Game Rankings, Glover dropped down to 31%, and IGN gave the PlayStation version an abysmal 2.6 out of 10. And that's what I want to look at today. I'd never played the PlayStation version prior to working on this video, so I want to see for myself why the PlayStation version is considered so much worse. I'm going to be looking at what the two versions do differently, so if you inexplicably hate the phrase "in the N64 version," you might just want to turn this video off right now. So, the very first thing we notice is the game's opening cinematic, and how it's an actual cinematic that isn't just made with in-engine models. And honestly, I think it looks pretty good. Though I can't say that for the rest of the game. I mean, seriously, just look at this. This is the N64 version, and this is the PlayStation version. The PS1 version is just so janky and ugly to look at comparatively. I think even compared to other PlayStation games, this just looks bad. And this version is from 1999, so it's not like it was an early title on new hardware. Sorry, I had to just get that out of the way because I could easily see the uglier graphics being a big part of those lower review scores. Another thing in the opening cutscene that really stands out is with Cross-Stitch himself. See, in the N64 version, the accident that kicks off the game's story was just that, an accident. It even tells us that in the N64 version. In this story, though, they made some adjustments, and we see Cross-Stitch sabotaging the wizard's potion ingredients beforehand. And it's not like we can just chalk this up to childish mischievousness. Cross-Stitch even gives the audience a knowing wink right before things go awry. I don't know if I consider this change necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. On one hand, I'm all for Glover expanding its lore a bit more and adding to the story. Like I said earlier, it's a very basic plot, and some extra details are more than welcome. On the other hand, now I feel like I have unanswered questions, like, why was Cross-Stitch evil even before the accident?
Isn't it interesting how the left or sinister twin is invariably the evil one?
You know what? That's as good an explanation as any. Moving on. Also, in the N64 version, the wizard got turned to stone, but in this game he seems to be made out of gold. Again, not really a good or bad thing, but if nothing else, I guess that's a step up for the wizard. Now, with the intro out of the way, I'm ready to dive into the murky, depressing landscape of the ruined kingdom and see that everything seems fine? What the heck? In the N64 version, one of the best parts of the game was seeing the kingdom go from terrifying nightmare world to peaceful and tranquil as Glover brought the crystals back. Starting out with everything bright and happy really seems to lower the overall stakes. Also, quick nitpick, but why did the PlayStation version get rid of Mr. Tip in favor of just floating question marks? This game only had like 4 characters and they got rid of one. Okay, so I mentioned that the PlayStation game looks worse, but it can't just be about what it looks like, right? Let's see how it plays, and it plays worse, just overall worse. I don't even think I could get into the full nitty-gritty of explaining every minor problem I ran into, but the main thing I want to focus on are the physics. See, in the N64 version, the different balls felt like different balls. For example, the bowling ball couldn't really be used for bouncing because it's a bowling ball. But in this game, it bounces fine. Still not as good as the rubber ball, which, by the way, now feels like I'm cheating, as I was able to easily just bounce straight over what are normally considered puzzles. And speaking of cheating, that's been stripped down quite a lot. In the N64 version, there were loads of cheat codes. Some made the game easier, some were just goofy, silly extras to play around with, but the options were there. The cheat code list for the PlayStation version just pales in comparison. But yes, I did still use the infinite lives cheat on that final boss fight. And I'm not sorry. Especially considering how much slower and more monotonous that boss fight seems now. You don't even have to get into the robot in this one, you just start at the final phase of the fight. And it's not even just cheat codes that were removed. Glover himself feels pretty stripped down here, with him actually lacking some of the abilities he had in the N64 version. Glover can no longer grab onto ledges to pull himself up, nor can he do cartwheels anymore. These omissions might actually explain the floaty physics I mentioned earlier, since in the circus world there's a puzzle that Glover has to cartwheel through in the N64 version, but in this version I just bounced right over it. Alright, so it looks worse and it plays worse, but how does it sound? I remember absolutely loving the music and sound effects in the N64 version. Cross-Stitch's evil laugh is still one of my personal favorites in all of video games. So, is it still as awesome on the PlayStation? That's not scary, that sounds like your chain-smoking aunt laughing at a Minions meme she found on Facebook. Okay, so it sounds worse. And it just wouldn't be Glover if I didn't have it freeze on me at some point. I can say that's something both versions have done for me. I want to be clear, this episode is really hard for me to do. Those of you that know me know I don't like focusing on the bad stuff. I'd much rather talk about the good things, but those are few and far between here. So, does that mean that everything about the PlayStation version is worse than in the N64 version? No, of course not. Just most things. Alright, so let's look at the positives. The first thing I liked right out the gate is the hub world feels like more of its own level. It basically just acts as a giant tutorial. And yes, there was a tutorial course in the N64 version as well, but I kinda liked how they spruced up the castle courtyard a bit more for this one. I also like that Glover actually sustains damage in this game. As you get hurt, Glover's model visibly changes. And there is something charming and adorable about seeing Glover with a band-aid wrapped around his finger. I mentioned earlier that the final boss fight was changed for the worse, but that wasn't the only boss fight that got altered. The Pirate World boss was streamlined a bit. Now you've only got one ape messing with you instead of 2, and the boss itself no longer shrinks each time you hit it. It's still my least favorite boss in the game, but this definitely felt like an improvement. Also, the clown from Circus World is still really ugly. Probably more so in this version. It's also pretty sweet how in the PlayStation version, you're no longer required to collect all the Garibs in order to play the bonus stages, as they just unlock after beating the boss of each world. I know completionists will still want to get all the Garibs, but I like that they're not a requirement. For the record, the bonus stages really aren't anything too special, mostly just simplistic time trial minigames. But they're more accessible here than they were in the N64 version, and I say that's a good thing. Another thing that actually kind of surprised me was when I beat Atlantis World and brought the crystal back, the doors opened for both Circus World and Pirate World. So the PlayStation version actually offers a little bit more freedom and choice in the order you tackle the worlds. Out of habit, I just followed the order used in the N64 version, but I still thought it was a really cool addition. This may also seem like the smallest of small victories, but the credits are way better here. They no longer just focus on the hub chicken, they aren't 11 minutes long, and they've even got a few jokes thrown in there that made me, well, not laugh, but like, do that sharp nose exhale thing that's like laughing. And that's really about it. A small handful of things that had me going, oh, that's pretty nice, and a whole lot of, why is this so much worse? I'd also like to mention something from the ending cutscene, which, like the new opening, is also a proper cinematic. Earlier, I commented on how I kinda liked that they added a little more to the story, but in this cutscene it kinda seems like they took away. In the N64 version, Cross-Stitch runs from the wizard in an attempt to escape, but here it's just like, nope, you're fixed. Glover for the PlayStation isn't a horrible game on its own merits. It's certainly not a good game, but I'll admit it just feels so much worse when compared to its N64 counterpart. I can't really recommend anybody play this version. In fact, I'm gonna do the opposite and say that if you're someone who has only played this one, I think you should go ahead and try the N64 version sometime. Glover will always be a game I have a lot of nostalgia for. Not only was it the first game I bought for the N64, which was the first console I bought with my own money, it's also the first game I talked about on this channel. And here I am, 4 years and 4,000 subscribers later. By the way, just hit 4,000 subscribers, super thankful for that, thank you all so much. And I'm here talking about it all over again. So, now that I've covered Glover, the Glover 2 beta, and Glover for the PlayStation, what else is there for me to talk about with this series? There is a PC version, but I probably won't talk about that as it's so close to the N64 one. And right now, the Glover series is in the hands of Pico Interactive, who've said they plan to finish and release Glover 2, so hey, maybe by 2021 there will be something new with Glover for me to talk about. Glover on the PlayStation may not be a great game, especially comparatively, but I'm still really glad that I finally had a chance to play it for myself. And I want to thank all of you for celebrating 4 years of this channel with me. Now, normally I end these videos with some sort of super lame glove pun, but I like to think that over the past 4 years, I've matured a little bit, and I think I'm past such things. Plus, I know some of you don't glove the puns as much as I do. I'm not even sorry.